Hold on to your butts.
Da-da-da. Welcome to episode 66 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast, joined again by my co-host Mary, a woman whose holiday wish list all includes gifts that have a 10-cent bottle deposit redemption. I am nothing more than an empty box named Darren. Hey Mary, how are you?
Oh my God. First of all, truth about that 10 cents redemption, because that's exactly what we get back for our beer cans here. And I told you
I had
that
to look
before.
it up. We only get 5 cents here.
We get 10 cents. And you're not just Darren or an empty box or whatever. Come on.
So stupid.
God. You're the artist formerly known as Darren. What's your symbol? Like a beer can with a moon on it?
Well, we've talked about this. We've been paying attention. Anyway, how are you? What's going on?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. The week is moving right along. It's already Tuesday.
I know. Already recording night.
Okay, it's fantastic. So we got a lot of fun things to do. We had a pretty good live the other day. We've had a pretty good, strong episode on Spring Hill, which was a lot of fun to do. We thought it was so much fun in Tennessee. We might as well just kick back there for a while and stay. Why not, right? Stay on the water's fine. The hospitality's fantastic. Let's stay in Tennessee. What do you think? We talk a little bit about the siege of Knoxville. Well, so we're going to have some fun talking about that today.
Well, hey, if the barbecue and the beer is good, why not stay, right? So
exactly.
That's why we're staying in the Western Theater. We're staying there this week, and we're going to be staying there next week, too, for Nashville. So y'all who are into the Eastern Theater, we apologize. We will get back there again soon. But guess what? Western Theater, 1863 at this time is where it is all happening right now.
It certainly is. And they treat us well. But what drink is treating you well tonight, Mare?
So I am drinking Psycho Thrill Seekers Double IPA by Flying Monkeys. And I'm drinking it out of a mug that John LaRoe from LaRoe Design sent me. And it is for the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry. And it is a very cool mug. It's got a quote from Captain William D. Matthews on it. And he was the commander of Company D. So it's very cool.
Excellent. Very cool.
How about you?
I'm drinking a beer called Red Zone by Knockabout, which is a local beer here. And I'm drinking it out of my Joshua Chamberlain Restaurant and Tavern coffee mug.
Very good.
From Brunswick, Maine, up there, not far from his house and museum. He's got a little place called Joshua's Tavern, which is a good place to go. And I got a coffee mug because that's what I wanted to do.
Nice.
So, speaking of Tennessee, we're going to talk a little bit about the siege of Knoxville, which is something that doesn't really get a lot of press because of all the things that were going on, specifically the Battle of Chattanooga that was going on the same time. As you kind of segued, it is the fall of 1863, and the spotlight of the American Civil War is really focused on Tennessee at this point. Eastern Tennessee was basically very important for the Union because of its large number of supplies that Lincoln wanted to keep under Union control. The area, we talked terrain, is very mountainous and extremely hard to maneuver. So moving large numbers of troops or supplies is going to prove to be extremely difficult, to say the least. So over there in that part of Tennessee, after his disastrous performance starring in the role of a Army of Potomac commander in Fredericksburg in December of 1862, of course, is Ambrose Burnside, who found himself sent west to command the Department and Army of the Ohio in March of 1863. So while William Rosecrans, we've talked about him, Mary, and his Army of the Cumberland is fighting Braxton Bragg in Middle Tennessee during that Tullahoma campaign, Burnside is going to be ordered to march towards Knoxville ASAP.
He is. And one thing to say about Tennessee is that it is the last state to enter the Confederacy. They did have a pro-Confederate governor, but East Tennessee, where Knoxville is located, has very much Union leanings. Vote to join was almost evenly divided. The thing with Eastern Tennessee is its geography is a little bit different than other areas of Tennessee. Slavery is not very widespread there like it is in other areas of the states. And many people that live there are farmers, and therefore they don't live that sort of lifestyle that, the slave owners do. Like you think the plantations, like they don't live that kind of lifestyle, right? They're having to do the farming for themselves. So it's a different way of life. Burnside he's in Cincinnati, and he ends up getting delayed because one of his corps has to go and reinforce Grant at Vicksburg. So that prevents him from getting to Knoxville. He ends up sending a brigade under General William P. Sanders, who we're going to be hearing more about a little bit, to strike Knoxville with the cavalry infantry, and he manages to destroy the railroad and disrupt communication around Knoxville. And at the same time as he's doing this, Knoxville is controlled by the Department of East Tennessee, which is led by none other than Simon Bolivar Buckner, who we have discussed in many episodes. August 16th, 1863 is when Burnside is going to begin his advance to Knoxville. He has 18,000 troops. They are commanded by General Lucas Hartsuff, and they move about 30 miles a day in some cases. Burnside is going to be on the left and Hartstuff is going to be on the right. Now, there is a direct route to Knoxville, and it's through the Cumberland Gap. But as you mentioned before, the geography there is very difficult to navigate, and there are Confederate defenses there. So because of this, Burnside will end up sending these two divisions 40 miles to the south, and they still have to go over a lot of rugged mountains. But what he does is he sends Colonel John F. DeCourcy's division to threaten the Confederates at Cumberland Gap.
Absolutely. And so, but talk real quick about how they kind of got there as well. You mentioned those two corps. He's got the 9th Corps, he's got the 23rd. The 9th Corps is one that's still Grant, so he's got to wait on him a little bit. Now, William Sanders, interesting dude. So, mentioned before, while Burnside is waiting for that 9th Corps, he's going to send William Sanders, and he's going to have him do all the same stuff that most cavalry people type do: cut telegraph lines, raid the Food King, destroy railroad cars, all the things he's going to do. Now, it's interesting, before we get to that point, we talk about when they get down there, but he has a really interesting raid in June of 1863 called Sanders Raid. William Sanders is going to head down there. First, he's going to destroy a well-defended railroad bridge in a place called Loudon, Tennessee, which we're going to talk more about a little bit later. It crosses the Tennessee River about 35 miles southwest or so of Knoxville. Eventually, Sanders has got about 1,500 guys, and he's going to go to a place called Lenoir Station, which is located within this 2,700 square acre plantation owned by a family called the Lenoir family. Sanders' men are going to destroy much of the area, including a bunch of general stores and Confederate railroad cars. Now, one building that he did not destroy was a cotton mill, because the story is it was used to make Union military uniforms. But one popular story in that area says that Sanders did not destroy the cotton mill because its owner, a guy named Dr. Benjamin Lenoir, was giving strange hand signs to the Federal troops as they approached the mill. It turns out Lenoir was a Freemason, and he gave a Masonic sign that was recognized by some of the Union guys who, instead of destroying it, ended up protecting it, and thus saving Lenoir's cotton mill. So it's kind of an interesting story with that. By mid-August, to your point, Burnside's men are certainly on their way. They'll march in 2 columns towards Knoxville. Burnside's going to be in the left-hand column with George Hartsuff, and that 23rd Corps will be on the right with him. Now, the 2 columns are going to meet in a place called Montgomery, Tennessee. And they're going to meet there, and they're going to continue their advance on Knoxville. So that terrain is difficult. And as you mentioned, that they do have to move about 30 miles per day through this landscape. And it's pretty brutal, because the Cumberland Gap is probably the only area that is defended.
It is. Yeah.
So what does Burnside have to do? He's got to go around him, right? He's got to flank it. You mentioned Simon Bolivar Buckner and his department of East Tennessee. They're going to end up getting recalled to go support Bragg.
Yeah, there's a little thing starting to happen in that area of Tennessee.
Yeah, so it's starting to rumble. Now, Buckner, is shorthanded already. He's sending support to this Tullahoma campaign. And he ends up leaving just 1 brigade in the Cumberland Gap under the guy named John Frazier. Now, Frazier receives no orders from Buckner whatsoever. He basically just left. And it's kind of like when your parents would kind of leave you alone in the car and say, "You be good," and then walk away. That's kind of what he did.
I always left the car.
But that's what, well, Frazier was better than you then. But Frazier has a few troops, and he has no idea what the heck he's supposed to do.
No.
So you mentioned John DeCourcy's division and cavalry under John Shackelford. September 9th, they end up basically getting into a scrape, and Frazier is going to end up surrendering. As the summer goes on into mid-August, Burnside is now in Lexington, Kentucky, and he has those 9th Corps guys back, and he's going to start to march back towards Knoxville again. So as we kind of get into the late summer, starting to enter into September, Burnside's going to get into Knoxville around September 3rd, and he's going to occupy the city. Now, Knoxville, it was interesting because you kind of mentioned a bit ago, it was really 50-50 as far as support, Union versus Confederate. But when Burnside strolls into town, he's a hero. At that point, it was like the Southern sympathizers seemed to control that social scene in the city.
Yeah.
They were the ones throwing the big parties, and it was all this other stuff. And the Northern supporters kind of had to keep quiet. But once Burnside shows up, those Southerners go quiet, and the Northerners start to take over the town. They start having all these big parties. Yeah. Now, Burnside, I don't know if you know this, Mary, but he sucks. And he finally goes into this town, and he's a hero.
He's fucking golden boy.
Right? So he has all his problems with Fredericksburg, the mud march, the whole deal. Now he's in here, and he's being lauded. So he's loving it. So around this time, Abraham Lincoln is going to send him orders to reinforce Rosecrans, which of course Burnside pretty much blows off. He doesn't even really listen to him. He's afraid of getting up the city, probably, but more likely, I think it's because he was so adored by the locals who was enjoying real military success. He just didn't want to leave. So I think he kind of blew Lincoln off.
Oh, I think he did too, completely. Because, we're talking about a guy who was away from one of the worst Union losses in the Civil War. Fredericksburg. It is a very, very bad loss at the worst possible time for Abraham Lincoln and the Union. And now he's basically adored by his troops, the citizens, and everything else. And of course he doesn't want to leave. And, he makes excuses to Lincoln about this. Like, he says, like, it's going to be difficult to move supplies to the mountains, blah, blah, blah. It goes back to this redemption he's kind of experiencing. He also says, like, he has insufficient resources to help Rosecrans out. But meanwhile, he does manage to send him some cavalry for Chickamauga, I think. The other reason, too, is he does not want to give up Knoxville because the citizens are so loyal, right? And it's like, it is a great place for the Union to have in what is one of the Confederate states, right? Like, he knows he's got himself grounded there, and if he can hold that, that's going to be a lot. But I do think a lot of it factors back to this redemption that he's seeking. It's like, and we've seen this throughout the Civil War with stuff, Lew Wallace and his redemption and all that, right? Now that's a little bit different, but
he's the liberator of Knoxville in his mind.
Yep.
And so he's having success. Now Bragg is sitting, he's focused completely on Chickamauga at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he's starting to become a little scared of Burnside's presence and his success around Knoxville. So, Burnside had that victory at Cumberland Gap, and Bragg's thinking, well, perhaps he could be a threat. So, jump ahead real quick here. September 20th, 1863. Bragg's Army of Tennessee just scores that big victory at the Battle of Chickamauga, right? He's got two divisions under James Longstreet from the First Corps under Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, who had been sent west to stop that federal push into Chattanooga in northern Georgia, right? So Longstreet, he's out there now. Following that battle, William Rosecrans and his beaten Army of the Cumberland, they fall back to Chattanooga on a trail blazed by George Thomas, who ran 100 miles an hour to get back there, by the way.
Poor Rock of Chickamauga.
A rolling rock of Chickamauga. But Rosecrans, he's going to begin to fortify that city. So around this time, Bragg's subordinates, if you remember when we talked about this, they start to chirp loudly about their commanding general, including James Longstreet, who freaking hated him, right?
Oh, so the two of them. And honestly, like, I see Longstreet very differently after researching this episode. Like, I've always kind of been Team Longstreet, and I still am in some respects, but I think he was 100% out there in the West because he was hoping that he would get that letter or whatever from Jeff Davis saying, hey, dude, you're in command now.
Well, that's Longstreet wanted Bragg gone, and to your point, he wants to be the man. He wants to be put in charge because he thinks Bragg is completely incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
They have that revolt that naturally Bragg, that failed, but naturally Bragg at this point wants that pain in the ass Longstreet gone. So he's going to come up with a game plan. He's going to decide to send James Longstreet out of the area towards eastern Tennessee, hoping it's going to divert some troops holding Chattanooga. But realistically, he just wants Longstreet gone. He just wants him gone.
He does.
So he petitions Jefferson Davis. He sends him a text, and Davis comes back and says, yeah, go ahead, and orders Longstreet to send his division, 10,000 guys under his division commanders, Lafayette McLaws and Micah Jenkins, the guy who took over for John Bell Hood. Yeah. Speaking of John Bell Hood.
Yeah.
Along with 5,000 cavalry under our old friend Joseph the War Child Wheeler.
Yeah.
He's going to send these guys to go recapture Knoxville, which had fallen to Burnside's army in September after Simon Buckner had vacated the city, to help Bragg fight Rosecrans and Grant. So the wheels are kind of in motion. So this is kind of a Mean Girls game plan where I killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Maybe, just maybe, Grant is going to send some guys to chase him. But either way, Longstreet is out of here. He just wants him gone. So
and that was the ultimate goal. And I would encourage our listeners to read Smoke at Dawn by Jeff Shara, because there is a really great scene in there where this is, again, it's historical fiction. It's not known if this conversation really happened, but Longstreet is very, very bitter in that book, and he has a conversation with Patrick Claiborne about what happened between him and Bragg. And he is so sarcastic and stuff. And you can see it was just completely this Mean Girls, I don't like you and whatever. And that's pretty much what it is. It was nothing to do with anything, but they just didn't get along. And Bragg thought Longstreet was moving in his territory to take over. And that was probably the case.
Now, the plan we'll talk more about later on, but there's going to be a point where Chattanooga, Bragg cuts off his nose to spite his face because he probably could have used those 10,000 guys and the 5,000 cavalry, but that's another story for another day. November 5th, 1863, James Longstreet is now moving up the Tennessee Valley to try to get between Burnside and Knoxville. Longstreet's men are going to travel via railroad to a place called Sweetwater, Tennessee, but right off the bat, they're going to have issues by traveling. So the trains, first of all, were late, and many of the men decided to walk. Maybe they hitchhiked, who knows, but they had decided to walk. It's going to take 8 days days for Longstreet's guys to march 60 miles to Sweetwater, which is about halfway to Knoxville.
Yep.
So they're already slow. They finally get to Sweetwater on the 12th of November, but when they arrived, they realized their supplies weren't there.
No.
They were supposed to get their stuff. So now they're stranded with little food, very little supplies.
No DQ gift cards.
No DQ, that Cars song, Who's Gonna Drive Me Home Tonight, is probably playing in their ears because they're just kind of stranded, right? Around this time, Burnside now had fallen back that Loudon, Tennessee. We talked about where Sanders' raid took place earlier in June. Now Lincoln, he'd wanted Burnside to move to support Rosecrans and Chattanooga, but he decided to stay put. We talked about that. Now Lincoln, claims he knew Longstreet was coming, but the good news for Lincoln was that Burnside had no desire to comply with this order anyway, so it kind of worked out for the best. Burnside's going to end up ordering 5,000 of his guys to advance towards Longstreet's advancing army. Now he knew the best course Burnside was to go outside of Knoxville to fight him outside of the city, knowing that if things got bad, he could fall back into the city. So that's kind of his game plan. It was actually a pretty good one. So a couple of days later, on the 14th of November, James Longstreet will cross that Tennessee River just west of Loudon. So the armies are starting to get close.
Yeah. Just one thing I wanted to mention about Longstreet going there is one of the reasons he struggled too was because he didn't have any accurate maps available to him. And what he said about that, Buckner was kind enough to give me some inaccurate maps of the country along Holston, all that he had. That was another thing that hindered him. The other thing too is Longstreet did object to going to Knoxville. He felt that there was nothing to gain by it, and he knows he's going to be outnumbered because he's only got 10,000 men in 2 infantry divisions, as you said, McLaws and Micah Jenkins, and the cavalry under Wheeler, and Burnside had 12,000 troops and 8,500 cavalry. So he does feel like this is not a great plan for him. And I also think that Longstreet just doesn't really, I don't know if he's giving it 100% of his effort because of what happened between him and Bragg either.
Well, I think he probably felt he got voted off the island a little bit.
Yeah.
I think realistically.
Yeah.
And he definitely did not want to go. He wanted to stay. He wanted to command that army of Tennessee. But now he feels like he's being banished. He got sent away on this fun run with less guys. Maybe he was on some kind of death march. But he definitely did not want to get there. But to Longstreet's credit, he's going to do the best he can. So as Longstreet crosses that Tennessee River, Burnside's going to kind of anticipate this move. And on the 16th of November, a couple of days later, he's going to leave Lenoir and he's going to settle to a place called Campbell Station. Now, Campbell Station was a crossroads that intersected a couple of roads, the Concord and the Kingston roads, which kind of was on the way to Knoxville. So he wanted to get to that intersection before Longstreet, because if he did, he could maintain that safe fall back to Knoxville. So this way he gets there pretty quick. So he had to race as fast as he could to that spot. He raced faster than an unnamed Canadian did up Cemetery Hill towards a Howard statue. Not sure Burnside had tears in his eyes too. We don't know that. But the whole
at least I didn't knock you over on the way up there.
Oh God, they're both racing to get to that same point.
And the funny thing is so there's Burnside has to basically force march his men there, and he manages to reach there first. But you know who gets there in 15 minutes later is Longstreet. It is that close. I don't know if I've ever read of anything in the Civil War where it has been that close, where, one person gets to where they need to be and the other is there within 15 minutes. So what Longstreet is going to do here at Campbell Station is he's going to attempt a double envelopment. So he's going to try and strike both Union flanks at the same time. But as is kind of the theme of Longstreet, and this time at Knoxville, it's not his greatest time in the Civil War at all. Now, the Confederates do gain a little bit of ground and they fight pretty hard, but they end up having to quit their attack because Burnside's men are just, they're able to fight back pretty well. And Burnside is able to get back pretty quickly along that road to Knoxville. That's when you have this quote unquote siege of Knoxville beginning.
McLaws did a pretty good job hitting on that rebel left, but it was like Micah Jenkins kind of screwed the whole thing up, and but that plan that he had to fall back was a good one. So while this is going on, Burnside's going to order the construction of a strong defensive fort back at Fort Loudon again, which will later be called Fort Sanders. We'll talk about that. So he asked William Sanders to hold off Longstreet long enough for his engineer, a guy named Captain Orlando Poe, to finish construction of this fort, which he tells Burnside is going to be done right around noontime on the 16th. But they're working fast. Now, Sanders he's going to stay. He's going to basically stay while Poe does all this work.
Yep.
And he vows he's not going to retreat under any cost. So if he's attacked, he can protect that fort's construction. So he's going to stay there to the last man if he has to. Now, while this is all going on, okay, again, the Rebs controlled a nearby house called the Bleak House. Okay, this was Longstreet's headquarters. Now, the Bleak House was owned by the Armstrong family, who were Southern supporters and apparently threw epic parties in the area. They were like the big party
At
family.
Bleak House?
Here's the thing. You know why they called it Bleak House? It was in honor of the 1853 Charles Dickens book, The Bleak House.
I
That's
was
what they
just going to
called
say it
that,
must be that
right?
reference.
And they did it right. Now, you remember the Bleak? Do you read it? Esther Summerson? Didn't you take high school lit up there at the Santa's Workshop back in high school?
No, I didn't read anything by
Oh, you
Charles
didn't read it?
Dickens when
Okay.
I was in high school. We were
You
at
didn't read it?
To Kill a
Okay.
Mockingbird
Okay.
and
Well,
Hamlet.
so they called it the Bleak House. It was kind of ironic because it was like a real happy house. They called it the Bleak House because that's how it got its name.
I'm going to
So,
open a club called the Bleak House.
oh, you fit right in, especially on a Tuesday. So on this house, the
Fucker.
way this house was set up, it had this small cupola-like tower up
Yeah.
there, right? And there were 3 rebel sharpshooters up there hiding. Now they had those really expensive British Whitworth rifles with the telescopic lenses and the hexagonal boxes.
Yeah.
And the bores, they cost $1,200 a pop at that time. That's how expensive these guns were, right? But they were fantastic. Now, one of them is going to take a shot at William Sanders while he's riding on a horse with one of these guns. And he'll be mortally wounded and he will die a day or so later. Now, the Union's going to retaliate by firing artillery at the house, killing all 3 sharpshooters in the tower. What's interesting, real quick, about the Bleak House, it is owned today by the Knoxville chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy, and it's available for weddings, parties. There you go. So you can still go there. Poe, as this is all going on, Poe's continuing to work on this defense at Fort Loudon. It becomes pretty much impregnable at that point because of the time he gets work on it.
Oh, yeah. And he does a lot of, like what he does there at Fort Sanders is he basically makes it impregnable. So there's a deep ditch, a steep parapet wall. The walls were icy from the weather. So, of course, I'm picturing, the wall from Game of Thrones right now. But apparently they poured water over the sides too. And there's wire entanglements in front of the fort, which were looped from stump to stump. So think like, something you would see in World War I with the trench warfare with the barbed wire, right? Along what was going on in Europe at that time. So Burnside said, by the 20th of November, our line was in such a condition as to inspire the entire command with confidence in our entire ability to hold the place against any rebel force that might be brought against it. But our men still continued to strengthen lines by every possible means within their reach. So Poe, this is kind of his and we're going to talk about this near the end of the episode. This is his legacy with Knoxville, is what he does here at what is going to become called Fort Sanders.
So the 17th of November, Burnside's army has fallen back to the city's perimeter. Longstreet realizes at this point that an immediate attack is probably not going to work. Mm-hmm. So he decides what he's going to do. He's going to try to siege the city, right?
Yeah.
So the siege is going to it does its damage. People think of siege, you think of like Vicksburg, you think of Petersburg. This is not quite like that.
The Confederates are not really equipped for this because they don't even, as you said before, they don't even have the supplies that they need. And they're running short on them. And Longstreet is waiting for Bushrod to show up with 3,500 men and a cavalry brigade that belongs to Grumble Jones. And E.P. Alexander said every day of delay added to the strength of the enemy's breastworks.
Well, Longstreet's plan for the siege was short term. He just wanted to hit them because he wanted to attack on the 20th. He wanted this to go 3 days, and that was it. But to your point, he's got to wait for Johnson. He's probably sitting at some bang barn somewhere, but he's delayed, right?
Johnson's at the Sky. No, he would not be at the Sky Barn.
No, not quite yet. In Grumble Jones, so he's waiting, and everyone knew the longer it took. That quote you read by Alexander is absolutely right. The longer it took, the more that this thing was going to get built stronger and stronger. Yeah. So finally, on 11/29, okay, the siege is basically fizzling because what you said, the supplies were low.
Yeah.
Longstreet got sick of waiting. He says, "Screw it, it's time to attack." Mm-hmm. So the siege did do a little bit of havoc on the citizens of Knoxville, but it didn't come close, like I said, the severity of what happened with Vicksburg with Grant.
Yeah.
But what it does is in a town that's 50-50 Union and Confederate sympathizers, they all kind of suffered to a point because they still had to deal with it. Now, Longstreet, what he's doing is he's going to study the ground. He's going to look at the terrain and realize the only logical place that thinks he can break Burnside's line, which surrounds the whole city, was Fort Loudon, the site of Longstreet's initial attack on the 18th. So Fort Loudon now, because of William Saunders getting popped, is now called Fort Sanders. So it's just northwest of the city. And since it was so strong, the Rebs knew they're going to have to sneak up on this at night and attack right at first light if they have any chance at a surprise attack. Now, you mentioned before the fortress, right?
Yeah.
It was the Union engineers they really made it a impossible place to get to. You mentioned those telegraph lines. It was almost like barbed wire. You
Yeah.
had to walk across this field, and it slowed everything down. But the biggest problem for the Confederates was that ditch. So Burnside's engineer Poe, he basically dug a 12-foot ditch that was almost vertical to get over it. Now, it was cold, but the soldiers on the Union side did pour water on it to make it freeze even worse than it already was.
Yeah.
So the other issue was the Confederates had no ladders.
Nope.
So they had no way. They had to climb up. They had to squirrel it and try to get up the side. Now, regardless, so dawn on the 29th, Longstreets were in position. We're going, right? That assault lasted about as long as a six-pack does in your fridge. It does not last long.
About 15 minutes.
About 15, 20 minutes, exactly.
Yeah.
So those 11 days since the Battle of Campbell Station was plenty of time for Poe and his men to turn that earthworks into a Union Gibraltar. Now, so this attack, McLaws is going to be the one who's going to lead it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he fails badly. He lost that element of surprise because they ran into the Federal pickets the night before. It took forever to get past those fields because of the telegraph lines that were tied to trees. So you can just see how the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
Now, once they got into the ditch, they couldn't get out of the ditch. They had a real tough time. So for 20 or so minutes, these Rebs are trying to climb the ditch to get to that fort, and they just got pounded. They lost 813 guys, while the Feds only lost just 5 killed.
In 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes. So in those 20 minutes, Burnside's men hit the Rebs with musket fire, artillery. They even threw axes at them. Some people may have tridents. Who knows?
Maybe there were clowns.
I don't know, make it worse than it already was. But the thing is none of the Rebs who made it into the fort would leave the fort. They either got killed or mostly captured.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a sound beating, and pretty much ended any hope of the Confederates having all of retaken Knoxville at this time. So
it's been described as. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and while this is all going on, just picture Longstreet now. He's realizing, well, this sucks. He learns that Bragg also got his ass kicked at Chattanooga a few days before, because he got orders to get his ass back to Bragg's Army of Tennessee at this point.
Yeah, and he's probably like, nope, not doing that. And and so
that's exactly what he said. It's exactly what he said. Nope, I'm not freaking doing it.
Fuck that.
He says no. He's going to hang around Knoxville for a while. He says maybe the University of Tennessee at a football game that weekend he was interested in going to. But whatever it was, he's going to stick around Knoxville. He ain't going. So, but the funny part about it was sometimes you stumble your way into good luck, right?
Yeah.
His decision to stay in Knoxville actually paid off. Because what does it do? It forces Grant to send those 25,000 troops under Sherman in his direction to try to slow him down from doing anything else. So it all kind of works into each other. So around right at the beginning of December, on the 4th of December, Longstreet finally decides to hell with this. He bails. He moves towards Rogersville, Tennessee, about 60 miles northeast. He's going to set up his winter camp, and that's going to be pretty much what that was. So it's just it all kind of works out the way it was, that him kind of being stubborn did one of Bragg's plans was maybe, just maybe, I'll get Grant to send guys out of here.
Yeah.
And he stumbled into it simply because Longstreet didn't want to leave.
Yep. And he does. And he sends none other than General William Sherman there. And so on December the 6th, Sherman shows up. He's exhausted and he's angry, and he's raced there to get there. Believed that Burnside is in a desperate condition, because that's how Burnside was actually making it look, that he was like, oh my God, you need to get here now or whatever. And he arrived in Knoxville, and by this point, Longstreet has fucking vacated the dance floor, and Burnside is having like a turkey dinner. And he probably, Sherman probably walks in the room and kind of looks at him, and Burnside's like, hey, what's up? Want to join us?
Yeah, probably the turkey in the fridge. Has been like everybody else eating turkey every single day.
They got a DQ ice cream cake for dessert. They're all set.
Mm-hmm.
But Sherman, he takes a look at what Poe has done here. He said, we examined his lines of fortifications, which were wonderful production for such a short time allowed in their selection of ground and construction of work. It seemed to me they were very impregnable. Because of that, Poe actually goes on to be with Sherman during the Atlanta campaign and the March to the Sea as well. So that's a positive thing for Poe that happens. But yeah, Sherman shows up and he has some level of pissed off about this. That he's like, what did you do? Like what?
Well, I mean, he's going to get there, and he's going to realize Longstreet's gone. He's going to get there, and just like a Friday night, no one calls, just sitting around waiting around. And he's going to end up leaving Gordon Granger's brigade back in Knoxville. And he's going to end up going back to Grant. Just for the F of it, he's going to send Burnside's chief of staff named John Park to go try to find him, go look in the woods, go find Longstreet. Doesn't really go anywhere. But the thing about it, though, going back to the citizens of Knoxville real quick, we kind of, it was a siege with maybe a small S. But the thing about it, though, is after Longstreet did leave, that town of Knoxville was a complete mess. Many of those houses and businesses were completely destroyed during the siege. The streets are filled with homeless and hungry citizens. A lot of Southern sympathizers looking around. They lost everything. They were looking for help. The town was also picked clean by the soldiers, too, and the citizens end up being left cold and hungry and miserable. And what does it do? It also destroys that social structure in Knoxville we talked about. They're all homeless now. So, and it's no surprise if you've ever been in Knoxville. There's not a lot of Civil War stuff there.
No,
it's almost like they decide to not remember it. There's a couple things, but I think because that experience they had, they for the most part just decided just to move on from it, rebuild, and that's not really care about it,
Yeah, and I think too, because it was so union leaning as well. It's weird that there's not much to do with the Civil War there, and it is probably like they kind of like, oh well, whatever, we just want to forget about it, sort of thing, right?
No, and talk about Burnside. You talked at the very beginning about a kind of a redemption for him, but say what you will about him, but his actions at Knoxville did keep those 15 or so thousand rebels from staying with Braxton Bragg, right? Guys who he clearly could have used the Battle of Chattanooga.
Yep.
So if anything, if you think about it, Burnside's actions were somewhat of a redemption toward your point that you mentioned earlier. Is because you know what happens after Burnside goes to Knoxville, they never lose East Tennessee again. They maintain control for the rest of the war from that. So
I think he was smart. I think he was smart to stay where he did, even if it was partially for himself to feel better about after Fredericksburg. But two, you have this whole thing that the only reason that Longstreet is being ousted, from Chattanooga, Chickamauga is because of this rivalry he has with Bragg, that Bragg was very threatened by him. But two, I think Longstreet did expect to get command there. He's thinking, well, they're making me haul my ass all the way out here. Like, what do they want me to do? It's not Longstreet's finest moment in the Civil War. And when you think about it, when it comes to Chickamauga, Longstreet is given the credit for that breakthrough. But the guy who actually sees the breakthrough and leads the charge is John Bell Hood. And I think he needs a little bit more. I don't know if I want to say credit, but just you don't hear his name as much when it comes to the breakthrough at Chickamauga.
But the thing about Longstreet with this is what he does better than anybody is he blames. He likes to point the fingers.
Big time,
right?
yeah. Like he blames Buckner for, I couldn't get to where I need to be because Buckner gave me bad maps.
Well, I mean, as much as Burnside looks good, Longstreet looks bad. He blames everyone for this failure. Everybody. He's going to fire Lafayette McLaws for the failure of Fort Saunders. He's going to get rid of him. You mentioned Buckner. He's going to court-martial his brigade guys, Jerome Robertson and Evander Law from the Gettysburg people, who were under Micah Jenkins. So he's gonna blame just about everybody. And he actually tried to resign from the Army himself after this, but they said no. He actually tried to give it the old quit. All Pete got in this campaign, really for the most part, was spending a cold and shitty winter in Tennessee with little supplies before he does return to Virginia with Lee in the spring of 1864. So his winter vacation break was not very good, but a lot of it was self-inflicted. But what we mentioned before when he was back at Chickamauga and Chattanooga was his fire had been burning for a while. He had some success with the breakthrough at Chickamauga, but I have to think he still had a flame on his ass from Gettysburg not too previous before that.
He did.
And so he gets sent to West thinking this is my chance to redeem myself like a lot of these people do. He gets overshadowed by guys like Hood, right, at Chickamauga, even though it's really his breakthrough. I mean, it is Longstreet's breakthrough, but that gives him that feeling of superiority. he jumps in with the crowd with the rest of them trying to blame Bragg for
Yeah.
everything because he's thinking, I can probably get this Army of Tennessee. And Bragg, and I don't know if it's a stroke of genius or just stroke of luck, he gets Jefferson Davis to get rid of him and
Well, I think
sends
it's
him
because of
away.
that friendship that he has with Davis, and Davis probably doesn't know Longstreet as well as what he knows Bragg. And Davis, we've seen with Bragg, this is not the first time his subordinates have jumped, against him. It happened after Stones River as well, where they were
like so many of these battles, right? The losing team loses it because they missed that one division, maybe one,
exactly.
two divisions.
It's like
So
like Carter L. Stevenson, wasn't it Carter L. Stevenson, right? Like getting
Stevenson,
pulled from Stones River to go to Vicksburg.
A whole bunch. You could talk about the second day at Gettysburg
Yeah.
with that whole thing with Anderson and Longstreet. But you end up in a situation where, because of all the politics and the whining, you're going to have Braxton Bragg cut off his nose to spite his face, which is going to cost him Chattanooga
Yep.
by sending Longstreet across, because he I mean, who knows, say he would have won even with him, but he could have used him. Longstreet goes and marches in a bad situation, low supplies, bad terrain, the whole deal, bad weather, just a failed siege. He get his butts handed to him by Ambrose Burnside of all people.
Who?
Right?
It's funny. Burnside was who he was going up against at Fredericksburg. Burnside was the one throwing the assault after assault after assault after Mary's Heights. And what was it that E.P. Alexander said about Mary's Heights? The chicken wouldn't survive when we open up on that.
Mm-hmm. So really, it was a bad decision on many, many people. And this is one of those things we've talked about in a lot of these episodes, is sometimes the egos of men can really come back and haunt you and
That's
get
what
people
it is.
killed.
It's totally like, when you think about, it's totally a mean girl situation here. It's totally like high school girl drama happening that is causing this.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. So it's not black and white, but it's easy to make the case, at least conceptually in your head, that this march to Knoxville may have cost Chattanooga, right? It certainly didn't get near Knoxville. Even if they got Knoxville, then what, right? They're going to have to send someone there to hold it. He ends up leaving, getting chased out of there. It forces Sherman to take 25,000 guys west to go to Knoxville, which is going to weaken the Union Army under Grant.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes and goes and goes. So at the end of the day, this is kind of a foul ball by the Confederacy. They probably like to do this one over.
Oh, I think this is, this is Knoxville would probably be the thing they would like, can we do that again, please?
Because, I mean, who knows to say, Bragg was concerned about Burnside's presence in Knoxville before Chickamauga started. So there probably is some truth to that.
Yeah.
But at some point, he wins Chickamauga. He's going to siege Chattanooga realistically. Do you really need to send Longstreet? Do you really need to do that at that point? Probably not.
Exactly. Yeah, it just seems like such a, I don't know. But the other thing that happens too from this, the other repercussion, is the fact that because James Longstreet is going to the Western Theater, John Bell Hood is the one that ends up being in command of the Army of Tennessee eventually. Because Hood gets stuck back there because of his wounds. He can't go with Longstreet to Knoxville because of that, because he's lost his leg. And, less than a year later, he's in command of Army of Tennessee. A year after the Battle of Fort Sanders, the Battle of Spring Hill is going to be fought. And then a day later, Battle of Franklin is going to be fought under the command of John Bell Hood. So you look at the repercussions this has of Longstreet going to the Western Theater and what happens.
It all trickles down. It all leads one into the other. So
it's
interesting, to say the least.
The other thing to mention before we wrap up is two of kind of the MVPs of this for the Union, Sanders and Poe.
Well, I think Orlando Poe is a slam dunk. I mean, he was.
Oh yeah,
but he also, but William Sanders giving up his life to protect him, to help build that fortifications is huge. But certainly Orlando Poe is the guy you really have to give credit to, because if he doesn't build that, now admittedly, Burnside's only got 5,000 guys. Longstreet's got 15 to 17,000. So it could have rolled right through him. So that goes to show how important breastworks are and how important they were. And those breastworks were real and they were spectacular, Mary. They really, really were. But it certainly saved a lot of lives and won that battle. So I would say Orlando Poe, certainly.
Yeah, and I would say Sanders as well. And I've got a quote here that Poe said about Sanders. He said, "The hours in which to work that the gallant conduct of our cavalry secured for us were worth to us 1,000 men each. Every spadeful of earth turned while Saunders was fighting aided in making our position secure, and he had determined to sacrifice himself if necessary for the safety of the rest of the army. The fort in front of which he fell was immediately named after him in commemoration of the service rendered. Right there, Saunders is definitely very deserving of that MVP. But as you said too, Poe is definitely up there with him. And Poe goes on to, Sherman recognizes what he has done, and he goes on to be part of the March to the Sea. But Poe is not exactly humble about this victory and what he's done. So he writes to his wife, Fort Saunders had a bloody baptism. I am, as the engineer officer who constructed all these works, the lion of the hour. For my own part, I have felt much encouraged since the assault of Sunday morning, for our success was so signal that it led me to hope everything. What a brilliant page it will make in the history of the war. And my ditch digging saved Knoxville. My praises are in every man's mouth, and if I do say it myself, I have done my whole duty mentally and physically, and have established my reputation as an engineer upon the mean basis. And that's Poe writing to his wife.
Well, he's a humble fellow.
Very.
No question about that.
He's about as humble as George McClellan was, I think, in writing to his wife. He definitely was.
But you know what, though? He give him credit. He deserves a victory lap in this one.
He does. He absolutely
right.
does. Him and Saunders both are why this has happened. But too, I think this is a bit of a redemption for Burnside. Burnside trusts in these guys. What he asked Saunders to do is, Saunders ends up getting killed because of Burnside says you need to buy us time, and Saunders steps right up and says, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna fucking do that for you. And Poe in his brilliance, there's a battle soon after Burnside takes Knoxville called Blue Springs, and Poe had actually done a lot of recon work in order to secure that victory for the Union, which drives more of the Confederates back into Virginia after that.
Yep. At the end of the day, it's a pretty strong effort. It goes to show how strong defensive battling can be. So what's next, Mary?
So next we are staying in the Western Theater. We are going to be talking Nashville. So the final battle of Nashville, which is kind of our follow-up to our episodes about Franklin, which we did last year at this time, and Spring Hill, which we did last week. So that will be our next episode. And then after that, it's kind of to be determined what we're going to be doing, but we will announce those episodes soon. We are going to be taking the weekend of December the 11th off from both episodes and Facebook Live. So sorry, y'all, that we're not going to be around, but we will be back with you on December 17th with Nashville, which that's when that episode will drop. So 2 weeks from this episode dropping, Nashville will drop. We are very excited to announce that Kent Masterson Brown, author of Retreat from Gettysburg, will be joining us on Wednesday, December the 29th at 6 p.m. for our book club discussion. If you want to sign up for that, info at civilwarbreakfastclub.com. It's via Zoom, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We will send you an invite to that. So thank you to Kent Masterson Brown for being able to join us for that. Our next roundtable will be...
He's a big... You better behave yourself with him, Mary. He's a big-time guy.
I always behave myself. What are you talking about?
You better wash that potty mouth and soap your mouth for this one. Anyways.
So we are very excited that he is going to be joining us for that episode. And then we will have our roundtable as usual in December too.
Excellent. So a lot of fun things coming down the pike. We're going to kick back and chill in Tennessee for a while and just enjoy the sights. Just get ready for Nashville, which is coming up down the road. So any final words from you, Fincheroo?
Well, thank you as always for bringing it. You are the most awesome Civil War nerd I know. And thank you to our listeners as well for your support these last 66 episodes.
66. Who the heck would have thought we'd make it a 66? But it's a lot of fun. So all right, off we go as we look in the rearview mirror. We watch Knoxville disappear further and further from view as Knoxville is gone and Nashville is on the horizon. So off we go. So again, thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you on our live on Saturday. We will talk to you, Mary, as soon as possible. Next time we get a chance, look forward to our next conversation as we talk about whatever is on our mind.
Yep. Same here. See you guys later. Have a great night.
Peace out.
See you, y'all.